The next item of business is a statement by Shirley-Ann Somerville on response to the housing emergency. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Housing has an essential part to play in delivering the First Minister's 4 key priorities for Scotland, but most notably on eradicating child poverty and growing Scotland's economy. Housing is both a social and an economic good. It is critical to supporting health, well-being, life chances, job prospects and tackling child poverty. And we know that more people must be able to access good, affordable homes. But we know that the drivers of the housing emergency are long-standing, complex and interconnected. A broad span of ownership and cooperation is therefore required to deliver comprehensive solutions. And that is why, over the past year, we have built a strong collaboration with a range of key partners spanning the Scottish Government, local government, housing representative bodies, developers, investors, third sector organisations and tenant groups. I'll take a moment to summarise some of the key activities and outputs from this year's delivery. This year, the Scottish Government is investing £768 million to support the delivery of 8,000 homes for social and mid-market rent and low-cost home ownership. We've also announced £4 million of homelessness prevention funding and £2 million to increase the scale and pace of privately owned empty homes being returned to use. We remain committed to working closely with the private sector to support economic growth, including through regional economic partnerships. Yesterday, the Housing Minister attended an event organised by Prosper in the south of Scotland and Annan, exploring opportunities for housing and how this supports the economy across the region. As part of our commitment, I am pleased that in addition to the work they have done with Government over the past year, the Housing Investment Task Force provided their reports to Ministers, and this will be published in the next few weeks. We are now focused on long-term plans for implementing those recommendations to unlock new investment opportunities across all tenures. Optimising the impact of investment is essential if we are to bring further private investment into the housing sector. One clear example of how we aim to amplify increasing institutional investment is the £100 million funding committed last year, intended to grow to at least £500 million to fund construction of 2,800 mid-market rent homes. The procurement for market testing of this is now live. We've also invested £46 million in charitable bonds, supporting the delivery of around 325 homes, and this will generate £13.8 million in charitable donations to help fund future affordable housing projects. To home in on the areas in most need, we've adopted a targeted approach, and we introduced a new £80 million Voids and Acquisitions Fund, with 80% of this resource directed towards the 5 local authorities facing the most sustained temporary accommodation pressures. And we have already been able to see marked positive impacts, with Edinburgh Council's management information showing us that void levels have been cut by over 50% since June 2023. This approach has brought more than 1,000 properties into use as affordable homes, helping reduce the number of homelessness households spending long periods in temporary accommodation. A further reflection of our determination to focus our efforts to those most in need has been working with local authorities to directly support increased family housing capacity. Our investment of £3.7 million in the Scottish Empty Homes Partnership and network of empty homes officers is also delivering real results, with more than 11,000 homes being returned to active use since 2010, including 1,875 in 1 year alone, as per the latest analysis. Our work on planning is demonstrating the activist, supportive government approach that will take Scotland through and beyond this emergency. We have progressed the 23 actions set out in the Planning and Housing Emergency Delivery Plan, and we have worked at pace and in close collaboration with housing providers and local government on removing barriers to stalled sites. Through strategic action and direct intervention, we are supporting the delivery of up to 20,000 new homes. The stalled sites work undertaken since the autumn is another example of the partnership working required, government and business working together to identify problems and to deliver solutions. We have also progressed our programme for government commitment on strategic sites by confirming £15 million of funding to unlock the opportunities for over 800 affordable net zero homes at the Granton strategic site, supporting our approach to place-based intervention. Alongside this, we have been working intensively with local authority partners to better understand the local drivers of homelessness and temporary accommodation, helping partners to develop plans for impactful, purposeful spend, sharing best practice and pursuing economy of scale opportunities. Turning now to our action on homelessness, temporary accommodation is an important safety net for those who need it, but we want to see far fewer households, especially those with children, in temporary accommodation. Focused partnership action has helped an estimated 2,669 households with children into affordable housing in the year end December 2024. And our most recent statistics show 20 councils have reduced the number of children in temporary accommodation. We take two lessons from that: encouragement that we can make a positive difference, but confirmation that there is still more to do. Our housing bill is currently undergoing stage 2 scrutiny, and if passed by Parliament, it will deliver new homelessness prevention duties and create new tenants' rights, including long-term rent controls for the private rented sector. These provisions will ensure people can stay in their homes and avoid becoming homeless. The new prevention duties, again, if passed, are seen by many as a game-changer, and that is why we've included an additional £4 million in the Ending Homelessness Together budget for 25-26 to help local authorities, frontline services and relevant partners to prepare for the new prevention measures and to help them to respond to the housing emergency by preventing homelessness before it occurs. Now, we are taking a cross-party, where at all possible, approach to ensuring that this legislation will effectively strengthen tenants' rights and protections so people can have safe and warm homes. And we also continue to support local authorities to transition to a rapid rehousing approach, with a commitment of £8 million this financial year to deliver initiatives that prevent homelessness where possible, and when homelessness does occur, to minimise time spent in temporary accommodation. The activity I have set out is enhanced by a partnership with private, public and third sector partners. The Housing to 2040 Board has been central to our collaborative approach, bringing together private developers, Shelter, Crisis, COSLA and national government to provide a forum to work collectively, share best practice and to stress test delivery plans. There have been welcome and valued contributions from across that partnership, and one example of many has been the sustained constructive input from Homes for Scotland colleagues. In June last year, following on from the emergency declaration, some members of the board formed a coalition of partners who set out a range of actions to respond to the emergency. Now, I'm pleased to say that out of those 17 asks made by that coalition, we assess that our action to date has resulted in almost 90% of those asks being met in part or in full. In addition to the asks set out by the coalition, last week we saw the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee publish a housing inquiry report, and that set out a range of recommendations for the Scottish Government to consider as we continue our work responding to the housing emergency. I thank the committee for their report, and we will give it close and serious attention before responding to the committee. Looking ahead, Presiding Officer, I have set out the work the Scottish Government has undertaken in the last 12 months, and we are making progress, but we know that there is much more yet to do as we move into our next phase of our response. That is why the latest programme for government reiterated our commitment to the delivery of the 110,000 affordable homes target by 2032. We will remove barriers to stalled sites, securing tenancies, double to £20 million our funding on housing adaptations for disabled tenants, and we will make available £97 million in discretionary housing payments, which mitigates against the bedroom tax and the benefit cap. We've also extended the Rural and Island Housing Fund to March 2028 to deliver more affordable homes in rural and island communities. This Government will continue to make progress, applying all available powers and resources to the challenge, and we will of course continue to work at pace alongside local authority and housing coalition partners to support a coordinated response. However, there remain a number of legacy issues, outstanding challenges and inhibitors that continue to present a challenge to delivery. The action taken by the UK Government to streamline the asylum decision-making process in December 2022 means that it will be challenging to reduce the numbers in temporary accommodation in the short to medium term, particularly in Glasgow and Edinburgh. I was deeply disappointed that UK ministers did not join a recent round table convened by the Scottish Refugee Council to discuss refugee homelessness in Glasgow, but participation by Scottish ministers in Glasgow City Council shows that we are very serious about working collaboratively on solutions. Other factors driving the increase in homelessness lie beyond the Scottish Government's control. Crisis has previously stated that we cannot ignore the essential role that local housing allowance rates play in preventing and ending homelessness, which is why the LHA rate should cover the bottom 30% of rents in a given area as an absolute minimum. This is an issue I have repeatedly raised with the UK Government's Child Poverty Task Force and would provide vital protection to those living in the private rented sector. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government's interventionist approach is making a positive difference. While the situation remains difficult, we are determined to maintain our focus, working with our partners, continue to rise to these challenges. That is the formula for moving Scotland through and past the current emergency.
Thank you. And the Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons now, and I call on Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and may I also thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement. A year ago, this Scottish Government was forced to admit that Scotland has a housing emergency. Sir Tom Hunter has said that Scotland's housing shortage could be resolved tomorrow if the Government listened to the sector. He said that he knew of developers who were choosing to take build-to-rent projects to Birmingham and Manchester because of SNP rent controls. Yet here we are, progressing a bill to bring in permanent rent controls that is bad for investment and will not result in one single home being built. Sir Tom Hunter is right, isn't he? We need to build, baby, build. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, instead of continuing with plans to push damaging rent controls, will the Government focus on building more affordable housing? On affordable housing itself, is she confident that the Government will reach their target of 110,000 affordable homes by 2032, considering the Government is miles off their own target and the statement provided today doesn't even mention the word build once? And finally, whether she will confirm today that the Scottish Government will not cut the affordable housing supply budget next year, given that it's already been cut by £218 million in real terms since 2021.
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Megan Gallagher for the question? I can say at the outset that, as I said in my statement, the Government is absolutely committed to the 110,000 target. I am slightly confused, Presiding Officer, however, about the outrage Ms Gallagher is portraying today around rent controls when she joined with Labour and the Greens to actually extend rent controls into other areas of the housing sector during stage 2. That's something which I have now written to investors about last week to reassure them that the Scottish Government, if necessary, will take forward amendments at stage 3 to ensure that rent controls are not extended. And that's one of the main concerns I've heard from investors recently. What I've also heard from investors only last week was the need for certainty. We have had differences of opinions here in the Chamber about rent controls, but we are moving forward with rent controls. We have taken forward changes at stage 2 through the Government to provide certainty for investors, for the build-to-rent market, for the PBSA. And that certainty is something that this Government is determined to provide. And I hope at stage 3 that Ms Gallagher will join me in voting for any amendments that have to be made to rectify any potential challenges that have been brought forward by earlier voting at stage 2.
Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What the Government have brought before us is not a plan for ending the housing emergency. It is, as Shelter say, a programme for homelessness. It's a plan that FOI responses show runs the risk of missing every single housing target it's set. We've got a housing budget that's still less in real terms than it was 2 years ago. We've got fallen rates of affordable new homes that are somehow packaged as a success. The 8,000 promised in the statement is less than what we've had in years before, and all this in the face of 10,000 children in temporary accommodation. Presiding Officer, can the Cabinet Secretary please point to me the part of this statement that will end the housing emergency, rather than more children waking up in awful hotels, because there isn't a single individual or organisation outside the government that believe it will?
Cabinet Secretary.
What I can point to, Presiding Officer, is this Government's strong track record on delivering on affordable homes. So the Government has delivered 136,000 affordable homes. That's 47% more per head of population than in England, 70% more per head of population in Wales. Now, that is a strong record that I am proud of, but I do know that we need to go more. But that's exactly why we have, as I've said in my statement, done a range of actions, whether it's on voids, on acquisitions, on affordable homes, or indeed in assisting private developers. And the work that we've been undertaking has very much been shaped by the 17 asks of the coalition, which I mentioned in my statement. They came forward with the asks at the start of the housing emergency, and it's those asks that have shaped the work that we've been undertaking on that. So, for example, they asked for a full reversal of the cut to the affordable housing supply budget. That has been delivered. They asked for prioritisation for funding to larger homes and in areas of specific pressure. That's been delivered. They asked for specific work with energy suppliers to assist with voids. That has been delivered and indeed is ongoing. So we are absolutely determined, as I say, to rise to the remaining challenges that we have. I know that we have made progress, but I also know that there is more to do.
Thank you. Emma Roddick, to be followed by Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's vital that we continue to press forward with action to tackle homelessness, ensuring that everyone has a safe and secure place to call home. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide any update regarding the steps that the Scottish Government is taking to support local authorities and frontline services to prevent homelessness, and what difference the Upstream Homelessness Prevention Fund is expected to make for people at risk? Cabinet Secretary.
The final project which Emma Roddick mentioned there, the Upstream Homelessness Prevention Fund, was an ask that came forward. I think it was from the SFHA, but it was certainly in response to the housing sector and how to deal with the housing emergency. And I'm delighted that the Government was be able to support that fund. Prevention is absolutely vital, Presiding Officer, as we move forward with tackling the housing emergency. And indeed, once we have moved out of the housing emergency. It's also why, as I mentioned in my statement, we've put that additional £4 million into the Ending Homelessness Together budget to assist people to prepare for the new preventative powers that will come in through the housing budget. When you put that together with the just over £30 million for homelessness prevention activity that is given to local authorities, the money to mitigate against the bedroom tax, which assists over 94,000 households to safeguard their tenancies and prevent homelessness. That prevention work that Emma Roddick quite rightly focuses on is absolutely integral to the work that the Government will be doing to tackle the housing emergency.
Jeremy Balfour, to be followed by Ben Macpherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The City of Edinburgh Council pays out millions of pounds of public funds to private businesses to provide unsuitable temporary accommodation that people don't feel safe in. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with the recommendation of a 30 organisation represented by Everyone at Home that this money would be better spent creating a challenge fund for councils, housing associations or the third sector to replace unsuitable temporary accommodation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Jeremy Balfour raises a very important point, Presiding Officer, about the money that is in the system and the money that's currently in the system used for temporary accommodation or indeed unsuitable temporary accommodation. Part of the very focused work that the Scottish Government has been undertaking in our reaction to the housing emergency is to deliver learning to all local authorities about the good practice that is happening elsewhere. So, for example, the local authorities who are using money that could otherwise be spent on temporary accommodation to actually turn that into permanent homes. That's the type of learning that's the type of practice that's happening in some areas of the country more than others. And whether that's a local authority responsibility, there is an onus on the Government to use its facilitation and convening powers to share that best practice to Edinburgh and to other councils to be able to assist in the reduction of unsuitable temporary accommodation usage.
Ben Macpherson, to be followed by Sarah Boyack.
As the Scottish Government has emphasised, the drivers of the housing emergency are long-standing, complex and interconnected and are strongly related to inequality. And so, while Build to Rent has a role, I have to say it is not a panacea. There are many measures to take, and the Cabinet Secretary has mentioned some of these that the Scottish Government is doing here in Edinburgh, where the emergency is most acute. The £80 million to realise voids and acquisitions, investing in Granton as a strategic site. Can the Scottish Government say more about how it is working with City of Edinburgh Council to help address the emergency here and the severe situation with homelessness and temporary accommodation? Perhaps could it consider keeping the local connections regulations under review in places where there is real pressure like here? And can she say more about the changes to local housing allowance and the difference it would make?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I mentioned in my statement that if the UK Government would move on its position on the local housing allowance, it would make a tremendous difference both in Edinburgh and elsewhere. We have, at the ask of councils, had analysis done on the impact of the change in local connections. What I would say is that shows that there is a flow from different councils from one to another, and there isn't a particular pressure that is coming on one council, but we will keep a particular eye on that. But it's an important part of people's rights that I have no intention of taking away. But we will always look at the impact that it is having. I mentioned the targeted work that's happened with the 5 main local authorities with the most pressures in temporary accommodation. Ben Macpherson mentions that £80 million for voids and acquisitions. Now, voids is something which is usually the day-to-day management of a council. But again, given the interventionist approach that we are keen to take as a government, we have provided funding, and Edinburgh others have taken that up. And I welcome also the fact that I believe Ben Macpherson got to join the First Minister down in Granton Waterfront Phase 1 to mark that £16 million that came to there for the Housing Infrastructure Fund. Again, another way, Presiding Officer, that the Government can provide infrastructure funding to unlock sites such as Granton.
Sarah Boyack, to be followed by Keith Brown.
Thank you. Can I draw members' attention to my register of interest? Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary whether she will accept that the £4 million homelessness prevention fund she announced won't even cover the work needed in Edinburgh, never mind across the country? And the Everyone Home statement was clear. Not enough has been done, the measures taken have been insufficient, the ambition too modest and the urgency lacking. So will the Cabinet Secretary acknowledge that the scale of affordable social housing is massively underfunded, because the need, for example, in our capital city, if we're going to tackle homelessness and enable people to access affordable social housing, at the moment people have to wait years and years and years. Does she think that's acceptable?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm sure Sarah Boyack would recognise that the £4 million is an additional £4 million that's came in to ready local authorities, other partners within public services for the new responsibilities that will befall them if the housing bill goes through Parliament. That is on top of the funding that's already provided to local authorities, to RSLs and others, to be able to assist in them both preventing and tackling homelessness. Now, I've been through with Ben McPherson and indeed others the work that we are undertaking to ensure that money is being spent, particularly in Glasgow, Edinburgh and other areas that have extreme pressures under temporary accommodation. And it's that targeted funding that is now paying dividends. I accept there is more to do, but we are seeing improvements being made, for example, around the voids within the City of Edinburgh's Council's own stock that will make an immediate difference.
Keith Brown, to be followed by Maggie Chapman.
Can I refer members to my register of interests and to my membership of a local government pension scheme? Given the scale of the housing emergency, it's clear that delivering the homes that Scotland needs is going to require innovative and collaborative approaches. So can the Cabinet Secretary share with us what engagement the Scottish Government has had with public and private sector pension funds to explore how their investment capacity could support new housing delivery, particularly for mid-market rent?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I thank Keith Brown for the question, because it raises a very important point of also ensuring, as well as looking at the funding that the Scottish Government can deliver, that we will look at innovative ways of bringing additional funding in to the sector. I have heard concerns from various stakeholders about some of the challenges around attracting private investment in and having the right investment structures in place. And Keith Brown mentions one of those around pension funds. That's why we are looking at innovative solutions. That's exactly why the Housing Minister established the Housing Investment Task Force, which will report in the next few weeks, and why we're moving on, for example, Presiding Officer, in that mid-market rent work in our institutional investment. That is a combination of Scottish Government funding and the private sector that will pay dividends to ensure that we are delivering much more than the public sector could deliver alone, using public funds more effectively and working out the structures that we need to put in place and can assist to put in place to attract higher levels of private investment too.
Maggie Chapman, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you. Scottish Government data shows that there are more long-term empty homes than there were homelessness applications last year. As part of the Housing Scotland Bill, I've lodged amendments that would see vacant or derelict properties being brought back into use for residential purposes through compulsory sale or lease orders. These are just some of the measures we need to implement to ensure homes are for living in and to help us prevent homelessness. Does the Cabinet Secretary support these proposals to increase the number of existing homes actually being lived in? And will she ensure a renewed focus beyond the Empty Homes Partnership to bring empty and derelict homes back into use?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I thank Maggie Chapman for the conversations her and I have been having around the housing bill. There have been some areas we've agreed on more than others, perhaps, but it's certainly always been a useful conversation. And the challenge that she quite rightly puts there about the use of empty homes is a very important one. Presiding Officer, I mentioned in my statement that work that is undertaken by empty homes officers across Scotland with Scottish Government funding support. And the work again that the Scottish Government has undertaken to analyse what is happening in different local authorities with the powers they have at the moment has demonstrated that some local authorities are using their current powers much more than others. And that's one of the areas where, again, we are hoping to demonstrate to local authorities who perhaps aren't going as far as they can in this area, that they certainly should be doing so. The amendments to the bill, I will of course give serious consideration, but she will know that we will be undertaking a review of compulsory purchase orders. It's a very complex piece of legislation, but it is something which, regardless of whether we want to go further on it, actually local authorities could be doing a lot more of with the powers that they have at the moment.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by Karen Adam.
It's not as much as I would like, but the Government has moved away from some of the damaging policy and the rhetoric of the past, which I believe contributed towards the housing emergency that we see now, with the high levels of temporary accommodation and the low levels of new starts and completions. So can the Cabinet Secretary guarantee that there will be no return to policies that damage investment in housing?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I mentioned in a previous answer, Presiding Officer, it's exceptionally important that we maximise the public funding that's going in to housing, but we also encourage and maximise the private investments going into housing. I recognise the challenge that Willie Rennie puts to me today and has done in the past to ensure that the government is doing all it can to ensure that we are encouraging investment in, both because it actually allows private development, but with private development actually becomes more affordable homes. So I can certainly reassure him once again today that the government, for example, has no intention of extending rent controls, that we will ensure that we're working with investors to tackle any challenges that they have. For example, the work that the Planning Minister is doing around stalled sites to see what more needs done, whether there's infrastructure funding that could unlock a site is something that we're given active consideration to a number of sites on. So I give him some examples today, Presiding Officer, as a demonstration, I hope, that I know that private housing investment is an exceptionally important part of the jigsaw of tackling the housing emergency.
Karen Adam, to be followed by Graham Simpson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Housing plays a key role in sustaining our rural communities. Can the Minister provide an update on the action which the Scottish Government is taking to tackle the housing emergency in rural and island communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we are very determined not only to deliver on the 110,000 affordable homes target, but also the part of that which states that at least 10% will be in rural and island communities. That will be supported by the Rural and Island Housing Action Plan. I already mentioned, Presiding Officer, some of the funds that are available for that, such as the £30 million Rural and Island Housing Fund that we have recently announced the extension for in the programme to government to March 2028. And there's also the work on rural affordable homes for key workers fund. Now, this is a demand-led fund, and I am very keen to encourage colleagues right across the public sector and indeed across this chamber to ensure that there are applications going in for that affordable homes for key workers fund to ensure that we can encourage the best use of the homes that we have at the moment, as well as developing new homes too.
Graham Simpson, to be followed by Elena Whittam.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary's statement made no reference at all to SME home builders, which I found rather odd. The number of active SMEs is down 2/3 since the global financial crash, and over 500 in Scotland were dissolved in 2023. But they're vital if we're going to build more homes. Now, the cross-party group on housing this week heard that upfront costs are too high, the planning system is too slow, but one of the biggest barriers facing builders is the cost of electricity connections, with sites across the country stalled because they can't even get onto the grid. So when the Cabinet Secretary is looking at the issue of stalled sites, which she referenced in her statement, will she look at this issue, and will she agree to report back and even meet members of the cross-party group?
Cabinet Secretary.
The aspect around SME developers is exceptionally important, and when I mention private developers, Presiding Officer, they are an important part of that work. The work with the stalled sites is also exceptionally important, whether that's for a small developer or some of our larger developers. And the way that that's been working is with Scottish Government through planning officials and others, working with developers to go through specific sites to see exactly why it's stalled and exactly what can be done to unlock that site. I'll certainly check in again on the issues around electricity connections, but I can certainly reassure Mr Simpson at this point is the entire point of sitting down and looking at every single site specifically is so that every single issue that's stalling that site can be discussed. It might not be in the power of the Scottish Government to actually then unlock it, but we can facilitate the discussions with other parts of the public or private sector, or indeed, as I mentioned in earlier statements, we're also looking to see what infrastructure funding can be put in to unlock private development. And I gave the example of the £16 million for granting, but smaller sites are also considered as part of that process.
And Elena Whittam.
Homelessness is a terrible symptom of the housing emergency, which is actually a people emergency. And people who have grown up in poverty, who have already experienced severe disadvantage and discrimination, are the most impacted. I've heard directly from women who have experienced violence in hotel accommodation, including sexual assault. This is trauma upon trauma. The lack of housing supply is directly causing people to be homeless. Given the seriousness of this situation, will the Scottish Government commit to doing everything they can to foster innovation and to increase the resources available for both housing supply and for housing support to sustain tenancies, while also supporting our third sector partners to play the huge role that they can in delivering housing first?
Cabinet Secretary.
Elena Whittam gives me the opportunity to put on record again my thanks for all of those in the third sector that provide that type of support provision, presiding officer. As we work through this housing emergency, it is important, as I said in my statement, to work together, and the third sector and is a very important part of that. She also mentioned tackling it through housing supply and support, and that again talks to the work that we're doing around prevention of homelessness, as well as the provision of more homes and indeed the better use of the homes that we currently have built. So I can give her that reassurance that I absolutely recognise the role of the third sector in providing those services, and thank them very much for the work they do, as she says, for some of the most vulnerable in our society every day of the year.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. I'll allow a moment or two for front benches to organise for the next item of business.